My name is Xander. I don't know who can hear this, but this is my last account. I want anyone listening to know that I did what I had to do, and I just hope the Lord sees my deeds. This all started in the year of our Lord, 1487. The village I come from isn't very large. It's but a mining and farming village just on the edge of our Duke's territory, as well as nearly even the Holy Roman Empire itself. Dense forests and rolling hills for acres upon acres. You could spend your whole life walking it and still not see everything. I myself can occasionally find a new creek from the river we're near to that cuts through the forest like a hydra. It's beautiful in the most serene way. Its pleasantness only matched by its intrigue. Every morning to hear the bleating of sheep out in the meadow, with the grain waving past the fence as I walk to fetch water for the day, is always nice and peaceful. There's nothing quite like it. Even on a day like the day this all started, where it almost seemed like minutes away from snowing. Our village was getting ready for our annual harvest feast, so we must harvest the last of the grain and choose which of the older animals we need to slaughter. It's a shame that Marie hasn't birthed any lambs over the past 2 seasons, and she appears to be getting close to about 10 years old. I remember her as a lamb when I was but a boy, so it will likely be her up for the chop. I'll miss her, but I do hope she'll be quite tasty. As I said, this morning was rather quiet as I finished collecting the last of the grain, breathing a sigh of relief from the mild amounts of soreness in my muscles, light calluses, and stinging from the cold of fall or near winter chill in the air. It was a rather strange morning. I didn't see Father coming from his home near the top of the hill. In fact, it was very quiet until my fiancée Anya came rushing to me, a look of worry on her face as she strode towards me, panting, mild chill on her breath as she finally said, "Xander! There you are!" I was taken aback that I was being searched for. Raising my brow as I set the roll of wheat I had down, saying aloud, "Anya, it's harvest time. Where else should I be?" Something definitely felt off about her tone, as well as the look in her eyes. It was one of a frantic panic. As she was catching her breath, I said, "Anya, my love, what happened?" She said, "Father Lek, he's been murdered." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had to see for myself. I said to her, "Show me, show me." She turned and I followed her to town. Everyone was gathered around the church in a crowd. As I followed Anya, my mind was racing. Father Lek was a kindly old soul who led our town through its most dark and difficult times. Losing him was losing a pillar of our community. There was so much crowding, and the loudest voice was Blacksmith Hal and Catchpole Trek telling everyone to get back. What I could see was Father Lek having a look of sheer horror on his face, his throat utterly lacerated. Everyone was murmuring and worried. I wanted to ask what exactly happened, but nobody around us had any answers, and the guards didn't either. After several minutes, they and the bailiff pushed us back, and the bailiff assured everyone an investigation will proceed and they will find someone to conduct mass, and the festival will proceed with a dedication to Father Lek. The commotion was so great that people hadn't even noticed that it began snowing. I wasn't concerned since I had harvested the crop. I merely needed to simply not leave it out that night. I looked to Anya as we stood in front of the grocer saying, "Does anyone know when someone found him dead?" Anya couldn't take her eyes off of Father Lek's body, the shroud being laid over him. I had to get her attention with a, "Anya!" She gasped slightly and said, "I'm sorry. So much is happening so fast. I think early this morning, They said the blood from his throat had already dried. I nodded and looked the same way she was at the father's body, being covered by a soft snow. I told her, try not to dwell on it. Let's finish harvest and speak to father tonight for dinner. Anya said, can we stop at the pub for an ale first? I need something to calm my nerves. I knew I needed to bring the hay bale in, but it could wait. And we already had several more back in the barn, and I wanted to see if anyone else had seen something. We stepped into the pub, where everyone else seemed to have the same idea, all with a pint in their hand. We could not even find a place to sit down. So much chatter about Father Lek and what he meant to the community. I asked Anya, who close to Father Lek would want him murdered? Anya took a drink and shook her head, saying, I'd rather not think about that. Whoever would kill not just a man of God, but a man of the community in such a way. I shudder to think what else they might be willing to do. I took a drink as well, a large gulp, before saying, I know he takes confessionals for everyone. Perhaps there was something that he couldn't keep secret. Anya said, I told you, I don't want to fathom it further. Besides, a confessional vow is sacred. He wouldn't break such a vow. I agreed not to speak further on the matter, as we drank and spoke of more pleasant things. But it gnawed at the back of my mind, like a rat slowly chewing on a fresh corpse. Constant questions running through my head. Even more so, when I saw someone I had never seen before in the tavern. I couldn't quite see his face. He wore the hood of a traveler, but I could see a tuft of black hair sticking out from the shadow that obscured his face. And slightly, ever so slightly, I thought his eyes were golden, like an animal's. I didn't want to start throwing accusations, but Father Lek dies, and the following morning a stranger is here. I reported him to the guards, and they said they would question him and tell me what they found out in the morning. After the drink, the village remained in a bit of a quiet panic as we walked back to gather the roll of wheat I harvested, bringing it to the barn for threshing. My mind's still racing. Who could have done this? Nobody in the village seemed like a murderer. Crazy old Leo, who lived on the outskirts and never seemed stable, thus his name. This was all a very sad situation to fathom. I was chopping wood for what would be needed for dinner in a few more days. The violent yet relaxing sounds of lumber splitting under my trusty axe. I was about to raise my axe for the 10th or so cut, when I heard rustling near our berry bushes. I rose a brow, fog coming from my breath. I stopped, stepping closer, waiting for any sounds. I smelled the air. I remember in my childhood, when Father and I went to hunt wolves, he told me to smell for blood in the area. And sure enough, the faint, coppery smell. I gripped my axe, ready to attack. This was odd, though. Our best dog, Andre, would have been barking his head off if he smelt a wolf in the area. The bushes rustled once more, but I heard something faint in my ear. At first, but it got closer. My father's booming voice with a "Xander!" I gasped and turned, and he continued, "Boy, what are you doing? I've been calling your name 3 times now." I was taken aback. I didn't even hear his voice in such a damning calm. I shook my head and said, "Sorry, Father, I turned, but the smell of blood was gone." He sharply said, "Was what? Bring the firewood in for dinner, let's go." I turned in the direction of the bushes again, hearing nothing as I gathered the firewood in my arms. He said, "What's wrong, boy?" as he gathered a bundle as well. As we walked, I said, Aren't you a bit concerned? Our town isn't exactly Prague. Nobody has found who murdered Father Lek. Father said, Boy, there are a lot of brigands around, and Father Lek hasn't exactly spent his whole life here. There may have been someone who simply wanted him dead. I found that strange, especially since the slashes across his neck. There were 4 of them, all one after the other. I paused for a moment before asking, but in the dead of night, right in front of the church? Father sighed, exasperated, and he said, Son, it's not our place. Leave it to the bailiff. I knew now that any further questions wouldn't do any good. We soon gathered for dinner that night, Anya included, as we were all rather afraid to walk about that night. Even as we looked out the window, seeing torches of the guards in the distance as they patrolled, we slowly ate our bread after Father said blessing, Anya saying, Good sir, do you think you have any idea who might want to kill Father Lek? Father said, Let's not speak on that. Let's look forward to the future. We need only look at the festival tomorrow. My brow creased as I looked at Father in a strange manner. His refusal to speak on this was strange. It confused and slightly scared me. Father once again attempted to change the subject and said, And in 2 weeks, you two shall be wed. And although Father Lek won't be here, that young priest Heinrich will do just fine. He smiled, and Father's smile was always infectious. It was hard not to smile in turn. We soon forgot about the rumors fluttering through our heads for now as we finished our meal, and then I began to walk Anya home. Our future marital home was to be her grandparents' old home that we spent the summer repairing, and were in fact waiting for the last of the straw to be thatched for our roof until we could get some planks. I kept the torch out, following the path to her parents' home. The unfortunate fact, however, was that the path did lead somewhere near the wall around a corner. My heart thumping, only hoping that the killer wasn't at large. My left hand only warm by the fire from the torch. It is always one thing to say that you'd give your life to protect those you love. It is another to actually do so. My eyes scanned the darkness. Anya saying, Xander, your hand, it's crushing mine. I just now noticed this, as I gasped and said, So sorry, it is. I'm so sorry, my love. She said, Are you scared that the killer is still at large? I nodded, eyes still scanning as I said, I'm just being careful. We arrived at her parents' home uneventfully as I bade my goodbyes and began walking back home in the pervasive darkness. Only scant amounts of torchlight in the distance. My whole walk was a pervasive, cold dark. While I didn't see anything that night, I couldn't help but feel something had happened. The following morning, there was once again a clamor about the village. This time, it was around the guards' barracks. The guards doing their best to keep everyone back, along with some sobbing widows. Not only was there one more murder, but there were several. The bailiff standing and telling everyone to just remain calm. But it was attempting to put out a fire with oil. First Father Lek, then 4 of the guards. The bailiff said that while the festival was cancelled, he already sent a message to Lord Althon, the master of our lands, to come and make an investigation and bring more men from the castle. The bailiff said the neck wounds were the same. 4 slashes across the neck, flesh torn open. Although this time it was different. There were more signs of a struggle. The door to the barracks had been torn off its hinges, and the men that were killed were also desiccated slightly. Blood seemingly drained from their bodies. The town went from quiet clamoring to a full-blown panic. My uncle, Hans the Crier, called the town for a meeting, and where we soon gathered in our recently built town hall to discuss what to do about the situation. the bailiff soon arriving as well. Uncle Hans had a habit for making things slightly worse. He said, "How long before one of us is murdered? We need to make a militia patrol." The town clamored in a raucous frenzy. Someone calling out, "Have we found out who's doing it?" Another calling out, "Who is it? We thought it was a stranger, but they're still here." I had something to say. I stepped forward and said, "I saw a stranger in the tavern. I reported him. What's come of that, bailiff?" There were more murmurs amongst the crowd after my statement as the bailiff stepped forward and said, "He has an airtight alibi, and there was no evidence on him whatsoever." That was not what the crowd wanted to hear. More murmurs as someone said, "What about crazy old Leo? Nobody is talking about him." There were chants of people concerned about whether or not he was in fact the culprit, until he spoke up. He said, "Yeah, let's get Crazy Leo!" with a genuine zeal that made everyone turn to him, recognizing his voice. Of course, the man may act crazy, such as in instances like these, but hearing his rather harmless sort of insanity is what puts people at ease. He looked about as everyone looked at him, following it with a, "What? Do I have something on my face?" People began murmuring, now putting the idea out of their heads, once again realizing that old Leo may be crazy, but he's still harmless. The bailiff called out, "Everyone calm down, please. Crier Hans, make an announcement later today as to who will be part of the night patrol and what our measures will be until we find the murderer. And Lord Althon will be here tonight with some additional guards. We'll be ready. For right now, everyone go about your day." Suddenly, Lord Althon's voice boomed as he said, "What is this about cancelling the festival, though?" Everyone gasped. Nobody expected Lord Althon this quickly. His presence was always something to behold as he marched into the hall. He made his way to the podium and said, "My dear subjects, it is my duty to protect you. We will not cancel the festival. Proceed as if there is nothing wrong. Whoever this murderer is, he wants all of you to be living in terror. Do not let him win. Stay calm." Everyone came to a calm, minus the cheering that he took in. Even I couldn't help but applaud at the time. We soon dispersed and began getting things ready for the festival. Our town's best cooks getting on the stews and breads. And Father, he came to me with news I didn't want to hear, but steeled myself for nonetheless. I stood over Marie after Father had already knocked her out with his hammer, a small spatter of blood on it. I raised the axe, hesitated for a moment, before Father said, "Just drop the axe down, son. It's one act, and it's over." I took a deep breath, gripped the axe harder, and swung down. My first kill. It felt like a rite of passage as Marie's blood spattered across my legs. I tell something of a lie as I caught newts that we would occasionally cook, but this was not the same. I knew Marie, held her as she birthed the young lambs, but we needed to provide lamb shanks for the feast, and Marie was now well past her prime. We had to do this. My father put his hand on my shoulder with a nod of approval. I sighed and nodded as I went to resharpen the axe. He began butchering her, my head turned away from the sounds of the knife peeling skin away from flesh, trying to drown it out with the sound of the grindstone. He said, "Son, you'll thank me for this one day." I nodded. My father's wisdom was always something that I began to appreciate as I grew older. Many thoughts ran through my head as we prepared for the festival the next day. But soon, night fell upon us again. The village out with torches once more, on the lookout for our murderer. And we had the advantage of a nearly full moon as well. additional light to keep everything illuminated. I began to walk down towards the river, eyes scanning the bank for anyone without a torch, perhaps dressed in black. It would help if anyone had gotten a better look at the murderer, but so far we had no idea what he'd looked like. That was the other strange part of all of this. At no point has anyone even seen the murderer. As I approached the riverbank, I felt I didn't even need my torch. The moonlight reflecting from the river, lighting up almost everything. So much so, what I saw reflected, and the faint smell in my nose. I saw a spatter, ever so small. If I wasn't looking for anything out of the ordinary that night, I would have never have seen it. On the bushes hanging over the river, there was a spatter of blood on the leaves. A crimson spattered right over a dull brown. And it was fresh. Wet. My mind raced. Was I near the killer? What should I try to do? Try to tail him? Go report it to the gods? I wasn't sure. I made a decision that I wasn't sure about at the time. But if I were to get a look at this killer, I needed to see him for myself. I took the hand axe out of my belt, lifting it above my head as I stepped forward, torch out, making sure to not touch any of the foliage. I didn't want to be burning down the village in the process, only using it to help myself see the blood in front of me. There was a fresh layer of snow from the previous day, and I saw a blood trail. Red drops on what was a pure white. Listening closely as hot breath came out from in front of me, as my hand gripped the handle in the cold air. The only thing keeping me warm were my layers and my torch. I made sure not to step on the blood trail, but my heart dropped as I heard not the snapping of twigs, a more wet snapping. Something I now recognized after this afternoon. It was the sound of bones and flesh crunching. I gripped the axe hard. I had done fisticuffs with my friends to practice fighting. Even Guard Captain Matthew occasionally gave us lessons on how to swing a weapon. But my heart was still beating so fast as I came closer, ever closer. The sound of crunching getting louder, as I made sure as best I could not to make a sound, even in the snow under my feet. The light from the torch eventually showed a corner from the bushes. I took a deep breath, crunching of the bones still continuing, taking another grip of my axe. As I turned the corner and raised it, and what I saw was someone I didn't recognize. No, it seemed like something. I didn't make a noise to alert them. Torch still in front of me. I can describe him only as part man, part beast. I didn't recognize the clothes he wore, but he was covered in a thick black fur. His arms long, leading to claws. His mouth filled with sharp teeth, and shaped more like a snout, and dripping with blood. It, as I could only describe this thing, stopped crunching on a bone, but only for a moment. It turned towards me with a snarl, its mouth full of flesh. The only thing I could think to do was to hold the torch out, raise my axe, as I yelled, "Stay back!" As I held my axe up. But no sooner had it saw me, it turned and bolted, leaving a blood trail. I must have stood there in shock for a full minute. I felt like my hand had molded around my axe handle. Before I tried to see who was its next victim, I trepidatiously approached the body, shining the torch over the mangled face of crazy old Leo. In the hand he had left, he clutched to something, and across his throat, 4 slashes, and blood trickling out. Hey guys, happy Halloween. Thanks so much for listening to this one, as well as the last one, and my take on Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart. We did it, our triple feature for this Halloween. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and click that like and subscribe button. If you want us to do this again next year, go ahead and let us know in the comments below. And let me know what you think. This was sort of my take on a medieval fantasy horror story that is only part 1. There is more story to come, but as I was writing it, I felt like it would go on a bit too long for this whole part, as well as the fact that I was just running low on time by the time I got to the point I did, so I am saving part 2 for a later time, probably next Halloween. I'm not just gonna drop this, I do want to finish this story, but once again, if you want more dubbing content, you want some of the other content we do on this channel, we're trying to get it done, but you can help us out by donating to us on Patreon and following us on our social media links. Thanks so much everybody, and we'll see you later.